Hi, STEMinists. Welcome to the Adventures in STEM with Everyday STEM Superheroes. My name is Erin Twomley, and I'll be your host for the STEMinist series. Some of you maybe have seen me if you were on Paula Todd's session, where we were with a chemical engineer. I'm excited today to have a microbiologist with us. She studies germs, and today's activity, we're actually going to be able to eat and play and experiment. If your caregivers say it's okay to eat it, you'll be able to eat it. So give me a wave if you can see me and you can hear me. We're just going to let everybody join from all over the world. I know some of you,
Erin, I can't hear you suddenly.
Okay, now I'm back.
Yep.
Okay, I'm back. Good. So STEMinists, welcome to today's session. I want to make sure that you've got gummy bears, that you've got some toothpicks, that you've got some string and or licorice, because you're going to need all of these things today as you become a microbiologist and create your own versions of DNA. And before we get started, as I know a few more are kind of trickling in, I'd love to do the Girl Scout pledge with all of you. I'm a former Girl Scout as well, so I'm excited to be here with all of you. So if you'll do it with me, we'll do the Girl Scout pledge. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. Awesome. So what we're going to do today is hear from our STEM superhero, Dr. Harshini Mukundan, who's a microbiologist. And she's also got a nifty scientist with her that's going to be helping out, and she'll introduce Nishta in the background there. She's a scientist just like all of you. Now, Harshini is a microbiologist. She actually moved to the US when she was 22 years old. She's from India. Is anybody joining from India? If you're joining from India, type in the chat. I'm curious. I think it might be a little late, but I just wanted to see if there's anybody. She studied lots of science, including biology. She has a master's and a doctorate degree in the biological sciences. She specifically studies germs like SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. How many of you have heard of COVID-19 and all of the germs, yes, that are going around? Great. So she's a scientist who actually helps us understand viruses and germs like that. And her science helps us develop better methods to identify germs that infect our body and treat people so that we can help save lives. She loves to share what she knows with girls just like you. So let's give a round of applause for Dr. Mukundan, who's a microbiologist who's going to be sharing with us today. Dr. Mukundan, take it away.
Can you hear me now? So I'm going to share my slides, and we're going to talk a little bit about DNA and germs, and then we'll do our activity. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about DNA, but before we get started, as Erin said, I'm a microbiologist, which means I study things that are too small to be seen with our eyes, microbes or germs. And I have some of those germs here for you. This one causes the really nasty TB disease. This one is, oops, I've got flu viruses, I've got Ebola, and you can see that they all are very small, obviously, but they all look different from each other. And these differences are actually because of their genetic material, which could be DNA or which could be RNA. All living things have genetic material. They either have DNA or RNA, and we use that and the features it brings to figure out how they're different, how they're similar, to learn, to understand, to study them. And that's what makes this super cool, is because there's always something new that they bring to the table. They're also constantly changing, like you saw with SARS-CoV-2. We had never seen that before, and now we have that. So let's talk a little bit about DNA, which is the molecule that I think makes us all similar, but makes us all unique as well. So all of you have, I hope, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, a face, and then 2 hands, right? We all have very similar distribution of features, but then your eyes are not very exactly the same as anybody around you, even your mom or your dad or anybody else. Each one of you is also very different from each other. Each one is very unique. And what makes us the same and what makes us different is our DNA. And so DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acids. And you can see the structure of it, this beautiful spinning structure over here. And it carries all the genetic information for most living things. I usually call it our giant supercomputer because it carries all the information that you need to make out who you are, how smart you're going to be, how tall you're going to be, what's your skin color, what's your hair, all of your features, all that information from when you're born to when you're a grandma is encoded in your DNA. So it's this amazing supercomputer that we all carry in every cell inside our bodies. And so that's just an amazing thing to see how beautifully nature has evolved to carry these kind of things. So the question then becomes, how if you stretch your DNA from every one cell in your body, and you have millions of cells, how long will it be? And the answer to that question is about 2 meters. So it's very long in one cell. But let me ask you this. If you stretch out the DNA in all the cells in your body, how long do you think that will be? Do you think it'll be as long as your table? Do you think it'll be as long as your couch or the room you're in, your house, maybe the street that you live in, maybe the city that you live in? How long do you think the DNA in each of our bodies is? The answer actually might shock a lot of you, because the DNA that is in each of our bodies, if you take it and stretch it end to end to end, is twice the diameter of the solar system. That's like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, all of it twice over. That's how long the DNA in each of our bodies is. And there's billions of us on the planet. So how do we actually carry that DNA if it's so long? How do we carry it inside our bodies? We carry it because we have a super packing system in our body. When you get the Amazon packages and they put all of the different boxes in one carton and pack it really tight so it holds to maximum capacity. Well, our way of doing that is what is called the chromosomes. And these chromosomes, they wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap the DNA over and over again, and they pack it into these compact little structures. And that's the form in which it's held in every one of our cells. And because of the super packing system, we are able to hold as much DNA as spans twice the solar system inside each of our bodies. And it carries all the information that we need to tell us what to do, how to do it, how to digest the food that you eat, how to chomp on the food, how to communicate to the brain, how to grow this person, how to process different things that you might be doing at a given time. All of that information is contained inside your DNA. So it's just absolutely miraculous when you think about it, when you think about how much this little molecule inside our body is actually capable of doing. So let's have a little quiz here and think about this. So how similar do you think human DNA is to that of a banana?
So if you will write down what you think, do you think it's very similar? A little bit similar?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Sorry, Erin, I thought you were.
No, go ahead.
Give it to me in a percent. Do you think it's 50%, 40%, 30%?
Right.
70, 80, 90, identical? What do you think? Okay, I'm going to show you the answer now. And if you thought this was the answer, then raise your hands. Our DNA is 60% the same as that of a banana. How many of you thought that? How many of you thought that 60% identical between us, you and me and a banana are 60% the same? Well, we have a couple of hands up. That's pretty cool. Now let's ask, how similar are you to Tom in Tom and Jerry, or the cat in your house if you have little kittens or cats? How similar do you think you are?
Give us a percentage. So write down a percentage, what you think, right? So we were 60% similar to a banana. Now, how similar are we to a cat?
90% similar to a cat. You and a cat have 90% very similar DNA between the two. That's how similar you are to a cat. How about Jerry, the little mouse on top of Tom's head? How similar are we to Jerry? Write that down too. And the answer to that is 85%. We have 85% similar DNA to mice. That's how similar we are to mice. You know, we look at a mouse or a cat and we think that's so different, you know, from us, but we are 85% similar to mice. And if you think about chimpanzees, monkeys that we evolved from, if you look at those, we are 96% similar to chimpanzees. There's only 4% difference between us and chimpanzees. And by us, I mean all the human beings on Earth. So all of us, whether we are tall or short, fair or dark, different countries, different ethnicities, different color hair, different color eyes, different features, are 99.9% similar to each other. There is only a 0.1% difference in our DNA from one person to another. All of us are the same and we come from the same pile of genetic material, and our DNA is 99.9% similar to each other. That 0.1% difference in DNA we get from our parents, from our fathers and our mothers, but because we get a mixture of those two, that combination of DNA is there only in each of you. So each one of us is also similar to everybody else, but each one of us is also unique. There is nobody else on the planet, unless you're an identical twin, with that exact same combination of DNA as you. So you are also unique and you're also similar. And that's what makes us both ourselves and a sense of community. So it's pretty cool. Now let's think about how DNA works and how it looks for a little bit. And that's what we're going to develop in our DNA model. We're going to make it using our gummy bears and our licorice here in a few minutes. DNA is what we call a double helix. You have one helix that looks like this. As you can see over here, you know, it's helical and it's spiral like this, like a spiral staircase that you might have seen. And the other helix cross spirals it. But not only does it do it, if you're seeing my hands on my video, but it also spins over on itself. It's kind of twisted like this. And that's how it looks, like you can see over here. These two strands are made of sugars and phosphates, and they form the backbone of the DNA. And we're going to make those with our licorice. We're going to use the licorice to make those two strands. In between those two, you actually have what are called the bases of DNA. They're nitrogenous bases that you see over here. And we have 4 kinds of bases in our body. And those bases are going to be made with our gummies. And they are what we're going to do with 2 different color combinations of gummies. The bases, I call it the best friends policy. They are very particular about who they bind with. The base that we call A or adenine, which we're going to show here in yellow, binds only to the base in the green, thymine. It'll never bind to cytosine, it'll never bind to guanine, it'll never bind to the other colors. So they bind only to each other. The base that we are going to call red, guanine, binds only to the one in orange, which we're going to call, which is cytosine, and it won't bind to the other colors. This base pairing and this best friends rule makes sure in the DNA in a particular order, and only the correct base gets put across from a given base. And that makes the language of the DNA. It's comprised of 4 alphabets, A, T, C, G. A for adenine, T for thymine, G for guanine, C for cytosine. And they bind A to T, G to C, T to A, C to G, only in that order. But you read the language going up and down, not crisscross. You read it as AGT, CAT, GA something, going on like that. And this means something. And that's called our genetic code. It's the language of the DNA. By the combination of this language, this AGT, CAT, our DNA says, this person's going to have blue eyes. This person's going to have brown hair. This person's going to digest the food this way. This person is going to grow to such a height. This person's going to have this sort of brain power. All of this is dictated by this language in the DNA, by this combination of alphabets. And so that's how the supercomputer works. It uses this combination of these little alphabets to figure out how to have all of the information in each of your cells. And so that's pretty amazing in many sense. So let's talk a little bit about who and how they figured this out. So what you see here on the left, what looks like this giant gray circle with some squishies in it, and you're all thinking, what is that? Well, that's actually an X-ray diffraction pattern. And when you actually run X-rays through molecules, like your doctor sometimes does X-rays on your bones, right? To see whether you have a fracture or something, it's because it bounces off certain things and it doesn't bounce off as much against certain things. And by using that information and what you know about the body, you can actually try to figure out what, if a bone is broken or not, but in this case, what are the different things that actually make up the molecule that you're looking at. Rosalind Franklin, who's on the top right here, is an amazing scientist, and she is the one that developed these X-ray diffraction patterns. She's a woman like you, and way back in the early 1900s, she actually grew to be a scientist. She fought her way in the world and created these amazing patterns that then other people like Watson and Crick in the middle picture here used to figure out what the structure of the DNA would be. So there's amazing ways in which people were able to use techniques that nobody thought could be used for biology like this, but helped us figure out the structure of DNA. Once they figured out the structure of the DNA, they could understand how base pairing works. They could understand the language of the DNA. And today we are in a place where we can actually tell how SARS-CoV-2 is different from SARS-CoV-1 within a few minutes. We can develop swab tests to detect it. And we can do all of this because we can understand DNA, because we can understand RNA and similar nucleic acids. And it all started with this and other works by other people. So there's never really where to start. You got to start somewhere. But this kind of information and digging deep into the questions that you have about everything around you is actually the way that science can grow and progress.
I love it. So Dr. Mukunden, before we go on to the next, I've had a good question. I've seen it a couple of times because you're using 2 different acronyms. And Girl Scouts, if you will, if you'll write down DNA and RNA on your activity sheet, right? Can you help us understand a little bit? You've said we've got DNA as human living things, but what's this RNA. Can you just explain that one more time for us, what the difference is?
So RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acids. They're both nucleic acids, so they belong to one biochemical type. The ribo or the deoxyribo is the sugar that's attached to the nucleic acids. And on Earth, there are two kinds of nucleic acids largely, deoxyribo and ribo. The deoxyribo looks like this. It's a double spiral. The ribo looks like this. It's a single spiral. And all human beings, plants, animals, all of the things that you can see with your eyes have deoxyribo. They have the double spiral model of DNA. But many of the germs, they actually just have ribonucleic acids. They have only one strand of DNA. So they don't have it, going like this, but they just have one strand of DNA. But it's the same nucleic acid. So that nucleic acids form the basis of all our genetic material, no matter what kind of life it is, but their structure and their shape is slightly different from really small germs to really large creatures like us and whales and dolphins and things like that.
Great. So if you can draw a picture, that's probably one of the easiest ways, right? That ribo looks like it's only one strand and that DNA looks like it's two and it's crisscross. That's an easy way to remember the difference between that RNA and that DNA. And it sounds like a lot of germs are made of RNA or have only RNA.
Only viruses.
Only viruses, sorry, yes, thank you.
And not all viruses either. Many viruses. Yep.
So just some viruses might have that RNA. All right, good. We had that percolating kind of, I can see their heads going, and we'll get ready to keep going.
So because you guys are all in middle school and stuff already, I'll explain why that is. Viruses enter our body and they really don't have anything in their bodies except this RNA or DNA, but most of them have RNA. And they cannot make baby viruses on their own. They don't have anything in their body to make baby RNA and make baby viruses. No, they infect our bodies and they use all the machinery in our bodies to make baby viruses. That's why they get away with just carrying RNA, just one molecule of molecules of RNA inside them. Anything that is capable of making own baby viruses or baby bacteria, baby humans, baby dolphins, baby cats, has DNA, because you have to split it and each one of them will then make another copy of itself and that splits and that goes on. So anything that's capable of having its own babies has two strands, but things that rely on other things to make their babies, like viruses, has only one strand. They like to travel light. And that's essentially what this slide is about, making babies. And so essentially you have two strands of DNA and they come apart. Each strand has some bases attached to it and it then finds another strand. Then they come apart, then each strand finds yet another strand and makes copies. And that's how DNA replication happens. And to do this, if you think about it, these kind of things are happening inside every cell in our body all the time. It's really, really complicated, but it's really beautiful. It happens all the time because you grow, your hair grows, you see, you're able to understand what I'm saying. All of these things happen, which means these processes are happening very well and very efficiently in our bodies, even right now as we're talking. And so that's the miracle of nature. And that science can actually explain beautifully in terms of how these work. And understanding how it works allows us to track new bugs, new diseases, understand how it's going to affect our body, figure out how to detect it, how to treat it, how to go after it, how to prevent it from being a problem. All of these things come from this understanding, which if you think about it is very, very, a very big complex network, really. So that's pretty much all I had for slides. So now we're going to stop sharing the screen and we're going to start talking about the model and make the model ourselves. if you're ready to do that.
So at this point, if you can make sure you've got your gummy bears, and people had a good question, you just need 4 different colors of gummy bears. It's okay if you don't have the exact colors that she's going to show today, but you're going to need about 4 colors of gummy bears. You're going to need some licorice or Twizzlers. If you don't have licorice or Twizzlers, you can use string. You can also just draw a picture on the back of your activity sheet, so you can do it that way. You're going to need some toothpicks to hook your gummy bears together, and you're going to want a flat surface because you're going to probably create yours on your flat surface, and then we'll ask you to hold them up. And Dr. Mukunden will be holding hers up so you can see hers as we go through all these steps today. All right, Girl Scouts, get ready to make your own DNA model.
So I have 2 colors of licorice that I'm going to use to build the backbone of the DNA. And actually, I'm going to go back to the screen so I can actually show you. Whatever reason, something else keeps showing up. I'm sorry.
So
Okay.
Girl Scouts, get your 2 pieces ready. We're going to have to make that double helix.
Okay, so you're going to make that double helix, and you're going to take 2 of these, cross them on the top like this, and stick a toothpick through it, through both of the strands, so they're joined on the top like this. Okay, now you've got to make them into a helix, right? So you join them in the bottom.
So you're kind of making an X at the top, and you're putting a toothpick together in the middle of that X, and then you're making an X at the bottom and putting a toothpick in there so that they'll hook together.
It looks like this. And if you, like me, bought the ones that are stuffed, then the stuffing starts oozing out. But that's how it's going to look. You're just going to put a toothpick on the top, and then you're going to put a toothpick on the bottom, and you're going to have it look like this. Okay, show me when you're ready.
Awesome. I see lots of cool double helixes. I see some Twizzlers. Ooh, I see somebody who maybe used those sour straws. That's a good idea. I see some black licorice. I see some orange licorice. Ooh, I see some yellow.
And if you have long enough strands, you can even make 2 rounds, right? You can make 1 round like this, put it through here, and then make a 2nd round like this, and put another one in the bottom. So you can actually see not just 1 spiral of DNA, but multiple spirals like that. Mine's not that long, but if you have, some of these look very long, and then you can make multiple strands of DNA in the same one.
Someone used a fruit roll-up. That's a great idea. If you didn't have something, but a fruit roll-up's got enough sticky and you can stretch it, Nikki, that's a great idea.
And they're all yummy. And that's the most important part. Very edible at the end of it, right? Okay, I think everybody has their backbone. This is the sugar and the phosphate backbone that we talked about, those blue that we looked at. Now we're going to bake the base pairs. You want to have 4 different colors of gummies to make your base pairs. And you want to say 2 sets of best friends, right? I'm going to use, like I showed in the picture, the green and the yellow for the cytosine and the guanine. And I'm going to use the red and the orange for the adenine and the thymine. This is the A and the T. And this is the G and the C, and they will not talk to each other. They only talk to their best friends. I'm going to take a toothpick and I'm going to poke one set of friends together into the toothpick, kind of bring them into the middle like this. So the ends are still there for you to connect them to your backbone. This is one set of base pairs. And I'm going to do that with the other one now. My base pairs are now ready.
All right, so if you've got your base pairs, show us. You're going to want those two gummies, right? That are the two colors representing the bases on the toothpick. You'll have two sets. And she's got them lined up specifically. Dr. Mukunden, can you tell us about that?
Yes, so you see how I have them on top and bottom like this? The reason for that is, like I told you earlier, Nishta, if you want to hold them for me like this. On top and bottom. The DNA language will be read from top to bottom like this. So it will read it as C, A, and whatever comes in the bottom. So it'll read it from top to bottom, although the base pairs are picked because of the crisscross, the side. So it's specific because of the crisscross, but the reading happens from top to bottom. And that's why I'm holding them like this. The language of the DNA is read from top to bottom, but the spelling of the DNA works crisscross. It's a little complicated if you think of it that way, but if you read it this way, then you can actually figure out the message in the DNA. And that's what this person called Hargobind Khurana figured out, and that's why he got the Nobel Prize for figuring out the language of the DNA. Okay, so once you have the crisscross, you want to open up your little DNA strand and you want to poke these inside. Like this. So it looks like this. Yeah, there you go. It's got another strand. And if you hold it bottom to top like this, then you have multiple strands of DNA. That's really good. Come on, hold it like this. And that's my daughter, my assistant. And her name is Nishta, and she's, I think, the same age as most, or age group as some of you. She's in middle school. Show me your DNA when you've got it all assembled and put together like that. Oh, that's a pretty one. Emily, Ellis, I like that.
I like it. Michelle, it looks like you've got a few of them. Oh, and she even twisted it. Oh, I see that double helix. Look at that.
That's really nice. Yep, long enough strands can be twisted. And if you don't have long enough strands, you can actually attach two strands using a little bit more string or.
Yeah, I have an idea. Let's see who can maybe make one of the longest ones. See if you've got a couple extra pieces of licorice. See if you can make a long DNA molecule. And if your caregivers say it's okay, you can have a little snack along the way. You can have a taste of a gummy bear, a taste of a licorice. Ooh, look at that.
Nishta and I attached our DNA together and made 3 long strands, but it's kind of wobbly.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it works. And it spins like this. And that's a lot of candy.
I like it. Let's see if anybody can make 3 strands together like Dr. Mukunden there. And Nishta, they made their DNA strands. And as you're building, if some of you have some questions, maybe we missed one earlier, if you want to raise your hand, what we'll do is we can unmute you so you can ask your question, or if you have an observation that you want to share with us.
I like the gummy penguins. Are they the ones with a little bit of juice in the tummies?
Michelle, did you have a question that you wanted to?
I'm Jenny, and my question is the DNA actually that color, or are you just using that for illustration?
I'm just using that for illustration. The DNA is not that color. It's just the biochemical molecules that come together. Interestingly, some combinations of sugars, when you look at them in instruments called the spectroscope, you actually will see some color, but they're really not colored.
Oh, that's a good, interesting fact. So we're just using it to demonstrate. Oh, Lana, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask a question.
I just wanted to ask, is the DNA actually in our body, or is it like somewhere not really in our body, or is it?
It's in your body. It's in every single cell in your body. And so if you just take some water, swish it in your mouth, and spit it into your tube, I can pull your DNA from that. And I can actually tell who it is from by matching it, because it'll be a 100% match only to one person on Earth, and that's Alana.
Wow. So a DNA is like a unique code, right? And so even though there's a lot of similarities, 99.9% of us have similarities, there's a uniqueness in that 0.1% that makes us all each individuals.
It's an interesting question from Christy here on what have I done as a microbiologist, because it's a career she's looking into.
Yeah, I'll let her ask it. She's here actually, so I'll let her ask it.
Yeah, so I'm actually Laura, like Christy's my mom, but I've been looking into going into microbiology, but I don't know like what field or like what would be potential for me to work on. So what have you personally done?
So I actually work on infectious diseases and figuring out how to diagnose them. We are actually developing methods to detect, or we've been developing methods to detect SARS-CoV-2, for example. So what I work on is emerging infectious diseases that are of concern to global health in different parts of the world. And what I've been trying to do is to figure out how to mimic, so every time you get sick with a particular disease, your body immediately knows that you've been infected with a germ. It doesn't know whether it's SARS-CoV-2 or something, but it immediately knows, and you get all the symptoms. Can we use those kind of things to prepare us for any germ that might come next, even though we don't know what it might be? And so that's the kind of diagnostics that I've been working on. Universal systems.
And she has a question.
How many DNA cells are there in the body, in a child's body?
Millions of them. So every cell in your body has DNA in it. Every cell has a little pocket inside it called a nucleus, and inside that nucleus is your cell, is your DNA. We all start off as one cell when we're first created in our mom's wombs, but by the time we're born, we already have millions of cells, and as you grow, you have millions more, and as an adult, you have even more number of cells. Do you get more DNA as you get, okay, sorry, the comments are moving. So can you stop COVID-19? I can definitely figure out who all has COVID-19 or has ever had COVID-19, or if they have COVID-19 right now. Based on that, we can figure out if masks are effective and put in methods to make sure that we stop the spread. I see you're wearing a mask right now. Thank you for doing that. That's one of the best ways to stop the spread of COVID-19 in public places. And the DNA, the RNA of it, is actually what led to the design of the vaccines that are coming out now, is because we know the RNA, we know how to create RNA-based vaccines. So it starts with this genetic information, but that, propels into different things. It's all a piece of the puzzle. You got to know what it is. You got to know how to stop spreading it. You got to know what works, how to treat it, how to prevent it from ever coming back. And people look at that, the microbiology, but you can work in any of these areas in order to prevent infectious diseases.
Awesome. Can everybody show me their DNA model and strand? Because I know some of you have been working on making a long one. Like Zoe's got a really long one I saw. Awesome. Emily, Riley, Claire. Let me go to my next page because there's a lot of you. Eleanor. Oh, cool. Awesome.
Wow, there's a lot of questions in the chat box. I see one about, do you get more DNA as you get older, or do all have the DNA you have from birth? You have the same DNA as you have from birth, but you have more cells in your body as you grow older and become from a child to an adult. And each cell has the same DNA, but you have more cells. So totally you have more DNA, if that makes sense. The DNA is the same. It's the same DNA, but you just have more cells and each one has it. Do you help find vaccines for viruses? Guys, I'm sorry if I'm missing any questions because they're actually spinning and going really fast. So please raise your hands and ask if I've missed a question. I personally don't work on vaccines. I work on detection and diagnostics, but I work with people that are working on vaccines and have come up with vaccine designs for things, including SARS-CoV-2.
Luna, you had a question, right, about siblings versus twins. Where are you, Luna? Let's see if we can unmute you. Luna and Laura P. Their question was, do siblings have similar DNA just like twins, or do twins have the same DNA? Maybe you could help explain that.
Yeah, so like I said, all of us here on the screen have DNA that's 99.9% similar, so we're very similar. But siblings got their combination of DNA from the same set of parents. And so their DNA is even more similar, but not identical to each other. It's still quite different, and you can tell those differences. Fraternal twins have even more identical DNA, but it's again not similar. Identical twins can have exactly the same DNA in many cases, in most cases. There's actually a few cases where there's small differences there too. Is RNA only in unicellular things as viruses? Actually, no. RNA is the genetic material in unicellular things in viruses, but all our bodies have RNA. So if you have 2 strands of DNA, I talked about making baby DNA, right? The 2 strands of DNA first have to come apart for that. So they come apart like this, and they come apart here in the middle like this, right? And then the information on each strand gets copied onto an RNA in our body. So RNA in our body is actually involved in copying the information from the DNA, in making proteins based on the information in the DNA. It's involved in all of those processes. It's extremely important for us. We all have RNA in our bodies, but RNA is not our genetic material.
Monique has got a good question about how DNA might interact with our personalities. Does it interact with our personalities?
It doesn't interact with your personality. It determines your personality. You are who you are because of the combination of different things that you inherit from your parents via the code in your DNA. So who you are, there's also part of environment. We'll leave that out, for a little bit because there's nature and nurture. But the nature part comes from your DNA.
Wow. And somebody wants to ask you, why did you study biology or start with biology? Can you tell us a little bit why you chose that path?
Yeah, I've always been interested in science, but But as a child, I was interested in many other things. I actually liked acting, I like dancing, I like a lot of different things. So you just have to explore what you're interested in, but more so than, like the space and the stars, which people that usually are interested in things like physics may be interested in. I was more curious about life around me and things of that nature. So the biology, why do some people get sick? Why did I get this disease as a child, but the other person in my house didn't get that same disease? So your curiosity can be in various forms, shapes, sizes. You can come and be interested in different aspects. But if you pursue that passion, it'll lead you to what your calling is. And in my case, I was more interested about life, more so than the universe and everything else, mechanistic in it, and that's what led me to biology.
Awesome. Kushi, I'm sorry, you've had this question twice, so let's make sure we get it. Can DNA be preserved?
Yes, DNA can be preserved, which is the basis of the Jurassic Park movie. But that really cannot happen in that way. But DNA can be preserved, and you can actually store DNA for very long periods of time, as long as the correct conditions are maintained. Sometimes it happens, after earthquakes and stuff. People have been able to pull DNA from Neanderthals and ancient humans and figure out how their DNA is different from our DNA and understand our phylogeny. So yes, DNA can be preserved and for a very long period of time under the right conditions.
Wow. Kira, you've got a question, and you're there, it looks like, with your other scientist brother. You've got a question?
So I have two brothers. This is one of them, and they kind of like doing the same things a lot, and they kind of look similar at certain points. Does that have anything to do with like DNA or something?
I think it does a little bit. Your brothers have different DNA combinations from your parents than you do. You have something called 2 X chromosomes, and your brothers have something called an X and a Y chromosome. And some of their nature and interests and stuff is encoded in their chromosomes, so it's in their DNA, so it's a little bit different. And I think boys, in that sense, do have some differences from girls, biologically speaking, as well.
Thank you. And this is a good question. Let me just make sure there's not another hand up. What about talking in accents or a different way? Does that have to do with our DNA?
No, accents don't have anything to do with DNA. The way you talk, whether you have, a different kind of voice, that has something to do with DNA. For instance, I was born and raised in India. And when I first came here, I probably had an Indian accent. Now, when I go to India, they say I have an American accent. When I'm here, they say I have a little Indian accent. And I don't know what accent I have. I'm kind of mixed bag between those. So it's more dictated by the environment, accents are, than compared to your genetics. And my children have only American accents because they were born and raised here.
Thank you for sharing that. This is a good question, because I know, how many of you like to code or play games or do something like that? Give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you like to code. Is biology or this kind of DNA replication maybe similar in any ways to coding or developing games?
It could be. So there's 2 different ways in which you can explore biology. Actually, there's multiple ways in which you can explore biology. If you are an experimental biologist, you'll be pulling DNA out of things, growing bugs in labs and pulling things out and putting them in machines and trying to read them and do all this kind of stuff. If you're a computational biologist, you're actually looking at the DNA sequences, you're trying to draw information, you're writing codes in order to, get signatures out of it, figure out how things work, and that's a computational biologist. If you're a bioengineer, you're actually engineering systems, and building things together, sort of like Legos, but at a biological scale. So you can actually explore science at the interface You can use computation in biology. You can use mathematics in biology. You can use physics and biology, chemistry and biology, engineering and biology. You can bring different things together to have different perspectives on whatever problem you're going after. So yeah, no matter what you study, you can apply it to completely different things. And that's the fun part of being a scientist, because you'll always keep learning.
Sophia M., do you want to ask your question out loud? I know you typed it in the chat, but go ahead.
DNA dictate who in the house catches a disease? What if there's 3 people and only one person gets it?
That's actually a very good $1 million question. It's something called your immune susceptibility. Some aspects of it, so if you have many people in the house, only one of them may get the disease. And some of it is very straightforward. It's got something to do with how old that individual might be, whether they have other health conditions that make them more susceptible to the disease. Maybe others have seen it before, so your body has immunity to it. Some of it is very straightforward. Some of it is not. And it actually depends upon how each one responds to a particular bug. And that can be quite different. And that's actually something that's based on individual body responses. And it's something that we're all studying still, which we don't understand completely. But a lot of it is very straightforward. It's got to do with things like age, have they seen that bug before, how good and strong is their immune system, do they have other diseases like heart disease or diabetes or other things like that. All of that changes our susceptibility. So it's not essentially got only to do with DNA, but it's got to do with some features that are dictated by your DNA in some cases.
And can you share with us some specific types of classes that you had to take in college that were related to biology, so that if there's high schoolers who are interested, or even middle schoolers, what did you have to study?
So the thing to do when you want to be a scientist is, even if you want to be a biologist, knowing just biology is not important. If I want to be a microbiology and I say I'm only going to study these germs, that's not going to be enough, because you have to understand how these germs actually infect our bodies. So you need to understand different kinds of biology. So, but you also need to understand chemistry to know the structure of DNA and things like that. You also need to understand mathematics. You need to have some degree of physics. So it's important to have a good, well-rounded science education in your undergraduate degree, where you learn different things and you understand different things. And then you can decide, I like biology best, I'm going to focus on it. And there you might study other kinds of biology, ecological biology, human biology, anatomy, biochemistry, the physics of biological systems, microbiology, genetics. There's all of these things that you can learn and study at that point. But the first thing is you have to know different aspects of science, and all of them, believe me, are important to getting a full-rounded experience and to be a good scientist.
Awesome. Now, this is an important question. We've only got time for about 2, but I think the one question that we even had earlier today is, can our DNA change? So if you change something about yourself, does your DNA change, or is it something that it stays the same?
Your DNA does not change, but your DNA decides how to use the information in different parts of it in different stages of your life. And that's what you see as change. So the same cells that you would code when you're a baby and you're growing really fast, you wouldn't grow as an adult. And so, but when that goes crazy is when you end up with conditions like cancer, for instance. And so your DNA itself doesn't change. It's how you interpret the message in the DNA that changes sometimes.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Olana, you want to ask a question?
Yes, I was just wondering, is any disease related to DNA?
Yes, so a lot of people can have what are called genetic conditions, genetic diseases, autoimmune diseases, conditions like Down syndrome. They're all related to your DNA and a combination of DNA that people may be born with. So there are a lot of genetically transmitted or genetically born diseases.
All right, Girl Scouts, we've only got a couple minutes left. Let's see those helixes, those DNA strands one more time if you haven't eaten them all. Awesome. Look at all of those. We want to make sure that we thank our STEM superhero, Dr. Mukunden, for being here today and sharing all about being a microbiologist. We hope you had a lot of fun experiencing with a real scientist what it's like to study DNA and germs and viruses. And we hope that we answered all of your questions. If we didn't, you can always get with us next time. We're super excited. Next up in March, we've got a neuroscientist. So we'll be studying all about the brain and how we understand the world around us. So let's give Dr. Mukunden a big round of applause, please, for being here today on a Saturday, Girl Scouts. Awesome. Dr. Mukunden, do you have anything you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you all for being here on your Saturday too, and for joining me today. I hope you had fun. All of you are amazing, and you can be STEM superheroes if you want. We need more girls to pursue science. No matter what you end up doing with your career, make sure you get a good science education, because it actually changes the way you think. And somebody had commented about dancing and acting. I love those even today. So you don't have to give up other things by being a scientist, or give up science by being other things. You can try to embrace all of them together.
I love that. And someone said, thank you. This was fun and sweet. What a good analogy, Emily. Thanks for sharing that. If you want to tell us where you're signing in from, in the chat, tell us where you're coming from, what state or what country, so we get an idea of where you all are, all over the world or all over the United States. We'd love to know where you're coming in from today. Don't forget that the neuroscientist session is coming up in March. If you want to do some coding, I'm going to be teaching a session on coding without technology. So you won't need a computer. I'm actually going to teach you how to do some coding with Legos or blocks. So we hope you join us in the STEMinist series, Adventures in STEM with Everyday Superheroes. Girl Scouts, we're so excited that you are here. Thanks for coming in from all over the world. We've got Cuba, Switzerland, Maryland, Germany, Massachusetts, New York, Los Angeles, Pennsylvania. Wow, we've got folks from everywhere. France,
Italy, and yeah, so many different places. England,
Texas, Japan. Oh, good. We've got a few. So thank you, Girl Scouts. We really appreciate you being scientists, problem solvers. We hope you have a good rest of your day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the rest of the world. Dr. Mukunden, if you just want to stay on a moment, then we'll be here.
okay.
Bye, Girl Scouts.
Thank you.
Thank you for all coming. Enjoy your DNA.